There is a question we never ask wealthy people. We ask how they made it. We ask what they own. We ask what it feels like to never worry about money again. We never ask the only question that actually matters. Does it work? Does the money do what you thought it would do? In 1978, a team of psychologists tried to answer that question directly. They found people who had won the lottery, life-changing sums, the kind of money that ends every financial problem a person has ever had. And they compared them to a group of people who had suffered the opposite kind of event. Catastrophic accidents, paralysis, the kind of loss that ends every plan a person has ever made. Then they measured something neither group expected to be measured. Happiness. Not right after the event. Later. And what they found should have changed how every human being thinks about money. It did not. The study became one of the most cited in the history of psychology. Lottery winners were, on average, no happier than the general population. Let that sit for a moment. Not less happy than expected, no happier than people who had never won anything at all, and the accident victims, the ones who had lost mobility, independence, entire futures, were not permanently devastated either. Within a relatively short period, their reported happiness returned to a level close to where it had been before the accident. Two life-altering events, opposite in every measurable way, and the same eventual outcome. Researchers had a name for what they had just observed. They called it the hedonic treadmill. Here is how the treadmill works. Every human being has something like a happiness set point, a baseline, genetically influenced, remarkably stable. When something good happens, a promotion, a windfall, a new possession, happiness rises, but not permanently. The brain adapts. The new circumstance becomes the new normal, and happiness drifts back down toward the baseline it started from. The same mechanism runs in reverse. Loss creates a temporary drop, then adaptation, then a slow climb back toward the same set point. This is not a flaw in human psychology. It is the psychology working exactly as designed. Because the purpose of this mechanism was never happiness. The purpose was motion, an organism that stayed satisfied, stopped seeking. An organism that stopped seeking, stopped competing for resources, status, and mates. Evolution did not build a species that finds contentment. It built a species that cannot stop moving toward more. If adaptation explains why new wealth stops feeling like enough, comparison explains why the goalpost never stops moving. In 1954, a psychologist named Leon Festinger proposed something that modern data has confirmed again and again. Human beings do not evaluate their well-being in absolute terms. We evaluate it relative to the people around us. Researchers studying American communities found something almost absurd. People were often happier living among the poor, in a wealthier county, the dusty, than living among the rich, in a county that was, in absolute terms, less wealthy. The number in their bank account was identical either way. What changed was who they were standing next to. This is why a person earning enough to be in the top 1% of their country can still feel behind, simply by moving into a neighborhood where everyone else is in the top 1/10 of 1%. Wealth was never a number. It was always a position. And a position, by definition, can never be permanently secured. Because somewhere, there is always someone ahead of you. By the 1890s, John D. Rockefeller controlled the largest fortune the modern world had ever produced. He had built an empire that refined and distributed nearly the entire oil supply of the United States. He had won. By any measure available to a human being, he had completely won. And in his early 50s, his body began to fail him. He lost most of his hair. His digestion collapsed. He grew gaunt, withdrawn, unable to sleep. Biographers describe a man who, by his own account, could not enjoy food, could not enjoy rest, and increasingly could not enjoy the empire he had spent his life building. His doctors gave him a choice that has since become a well-known account in the history of American business: change everything, or die within the year. Rockefeller did not fail because he ran out of money. He nearly died because the money never gave him what he had spent 40 years assuming it would give him. Only later in life, through philanthropy, not accumulation, did his health and disposition genuinely recover. The richest man on earth had to stop pursuing wealth before he could feel anything close to peace, To understand why this keeps happening, you have to understand what the reward system in the human brain was actually built to do. Dopamine is often described as the brain's pleasure chemical. That description is incomplete. Dopamine is not primarily a reward signal, it is a wanting signal. Neuroscientists have shown that dopamine spikes not when a reward is received, but in anticipation of it. The chase produces more chemical activity than the achievement. For most of human history, this was adaptive. A species that constantly wanted more food, more status, more resources, outcompeted a species that felt satisfied and stopped trying. There was no evolutionary scenario in which enough needed to exist. Scarcity was permanent. The wanting mechanism had no reason to ever switch off. Modern wealth did not remove this mechanism. It simply gave it more room to run, with no natural ceiling left to stop it. For most of human history, the comparison engine had a radius of perhaps 100 people. Your village, your tribe, the families within walking distance of your own. That radius has now expanded to include everyone. Every visible vacation, every visible purchase, every curated glimpse into lives, selected specifically to look better than they are. The ancestral comparison engine was never designed to process this volume of upward comparison. It was built for 100 neighbors. It is now running against several billion. Every person who has ever felt inexplicably worse after opening a social media app was not imagining it. They were experiencing a Stone Age mechanism, encountering a scale of comparison it was never built to survive. None of this means wealth is worthless. Poverty is not virtuous. Scarcity is not romantic. The data is unambiguous that a lack of resources causes real, measurable suffering. But past a certain point, the mechanism that drives people toward more stops being about survival and starts running for its own sake. The treadmill does not know when to stop. It was never built to know. The lottery winners were not broken. The accident victims were not simply resilient. Both groups were expressions of the same underlying machine, a machine calibrated over hundreds of thousands of years for a world that no longer exists. Rockefeller did not find peace by acquiring more. He found it eventually by stepping off the treadmill entirely. That is not a comfortable ending. Comfortable endings suggest a formula. 10 habits, 5 principles, a number to reach. This is not a formula. It is a mechanism. Ancient, effective. Indifferent to whether it makes you happy. The question was never how much is enough. The question is whether you were ever designed to feel like anything was.